The idea that, Rachel? Okay, maybe I should take over the screen. Okay, go down. Well, back up. Back up, back up, back up, back up. Okay, so right there, down, 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 down. Okay, keep going so I can read more. See where it says this passage? That's where we are. This passage is not against dependent origination, which is the Buddhist explanation of how rebirth happens without a soul. It is against the twin extremes of eternalism, the idea that this same self exists in the past and the future, and annihilationism, the idea that this life is the only one. This is the view espoused by those who reject birth, such as Fronsdal. Literally, the phrase ayoniso manasikara means applying the mind by way of what is not the cause. It's commonly used in the context of dependent origination. Again, it is posited the yoniso manasikara of dependent origination that rebirth is a process of change and evolution driven by choices. Fronsdal goes on. The concept of rebirth has a long association with Buddhism. Some say it was there from the beginning. Some is doing a lot of work here. Obviously, rebirth is fundamental to the suttas. And these are Sujato's words. And the gray box here are the texts that Fronsdal had in his article. None of my Zen and Theravada teachers in America or Asia gave any prominence to the idea. Neither do I, this is Sujato, when I'm talking to a skeptical Westerner. Much of his article is of that ilk. No one around me seems that concerned about rebirth. This is confirmation bias, not rational argument. So even Sujato sharing that he doesn't talk much about it to his audience, that is a bunch of skeptical Westerners, and he's saying that that is his confirmation bias, not a rational argument. So he's even calling himself out as to why he's made that decision or has also not done that. Ajahn Buddhadasa, who taught rebirth as a metaphor for how we are reborn every time we cling to an idea of me, myself, or mine. He did indeed. The suttas don't, though. Nevertheless, while I disagree with Buddhadasa's approach on this point, I understand that what he did was a very specific medicine for his culture milieu. Many people in Thailand have been acculturated to see Buddhism purely as a way of doing merit to get a rebirth. He wanted to refocus their attention on practicing for realization in this life. Giving the same medicine to people with the opposite set of beliefs is like giving amphetamines to an insomniac, particular Buddhist traditions that don't require a belief in rebirth. He phrases this as if anyone in Buddhism would require a belief in anything. This is annoying. We're not the Inquisition. Believe what you like, just don't pretend it's what the Buddha taught. It's so important. While the Japanese Zen tradition emphasizes the Bodhisattva ideal, it mostly does so without recourse to past and future lives. I've heard this before, and while I know little of Zen, I don't believe that this is an accurate characterization. Traditionally, Zen studied closely and followed the teachings of important Mahayana sutras. They were distinguished not by a different philosophy, but by a different approach to practice what modern Americans call Zen. It's largely a creation of the 20th century and is highly filtered and selective. Perhaps if I grew up with a concept of past and future lives, I would be so deeply conditioned to it that I would take it for granted. Of course, it could be argued that my disinclination to believe in rebirth is a product of my own upbringing by atheists. When I taught a retreat in Germany some years ago, the question of rebirth was raised. There were 30 plus people there, almost all white people from all over Europe, and mostly highly educated, physics professors, doctors, students, and so on. And there was one Thai lady. I asked for a show of hands. Who thinks there is probably something to the idea of rebirth? Every single person put up their hand except for the Thai lady. People are conditioned. Part of the spiritual path is questioning your conditioning and opening yourself up to the possibility of radical change. It's not impossible. I did it. When I started practicing Buddhism, I read Buddhadasa and thought, hey, great. He says there's no such thing as rebirth, just like me. The real Buddhist teaching is that there's no rebirth. How cool. I'm right, and all those other Buddhists are wrong. How dumb are they, and they don't even understand their own teaching. Then I read some suttas and realized pretty quickly that I was not in fact right. Lesson learned. I know enough about the history and evolution of the Buddhist sacred text to have serious questions about which words and concepts we can safely attribute to him. This is the kind of argument that sounds convincing to those who are unfamiliar with the methods and findings of comparative text critical study. The problem that it is using skepticism to cast a generic doubt over things rather than looking at the details of what text critical method actually does. It's like someone who says, well, scientists disagree about effective treatment of COVID, so I'll just follow my horoscope. What text critical method does is apply multiple independent criteria in examining text. We ask questions such as, is there a parallel? How does this relate to historical context? What are the linguistic features? Is the text coherent and clear? And it goes on and on. There's much more about this, but I just kind of wanted to take out the core middle. Rachel, if you can scroll up just like one paragraph, because I think that's how we'll open up our dialogue and start to ask a little bit more. So people are conditioned. Part of, right there, you just passed it. Part of the spiritual path is questioning your conditioning and opening yourself up to the possibility of radical change. So this is a good question for us to question our conditioning, what it is we've come to believe, just like the Kalama Sutta talks to us about, and opening up ourselves to the possibility of radical change. And then I think it's really cool how Sujato talks about Buddhadasa and says, yeah, because that fit my view. So he at that time totally took on that view, but then he came to learn it later on his self, which he goes back to explain. But it's easy to come along a teaching or a reading and to believe it to be the truth and to take it on for ourselves. And then also as teachers, if we're sharing that with others and doing the same, you know, it's our responsibility to make sure that we're doing the best to share from our direct experience and our understanding of the Dharma and share it as that, not as the actual words or teachings of the Buddha. So please do continue to look at it further. There's so much more there that is broken down. And also at the end of the Kalama Sutta, we'll go back to later, but actually the Buddha talks about, at the end of the sutta, it's not actually about the 4 Brahma Viharas, but about the 4 comforts of rebirth and karmic actions. So we'll go back to that after our dialogue. But I just thought I would open up with that question about our conditioning. What are some thoughts on just the pieces that we read here? And how are we, what is our fool's goal? So this is the question, if we can put the Sangha back on gallery view and maybe open it up, maybe popcorn style.
This is Ruth. This critique reminds me of being on a retreat with Silea Cecilia once, and she asked everybody in the room. Who believed in rebirth, and nobody put their hands up. And she laughed and said, "It doesn't matter whether you believe it or not; it's happening."
And I'll just jump in there and say, you know, a lot of us come to Buddhism through this way, through our Dharma centers or through a lot of the popular places that we visit here in our country. So if I'm going to look for a resource as a new practitioner to Buddhism or as a seeker who's interested, so these are some of the sites that I'm going to go to, some of the magazines that I might go to look for my information. So I think the thing here is just to know that if that's what we're doing and where we're going, to not always rely on it, just as the Buddha has shared with us in the Kalama from a sutta for it to be true. Again, it's on Insight.
Yeah, and it seems possibly dangerous if one is teaching others, and it's from like a place of wrong view or not a complete understanding. It seems like you can like derail people that may be listening to you and kind of trusting you in that fashion. So it does seem important to know what you're teaching, what you're talking about, and not just kind of spout off or be maybe like half informed or slightly informed. I was also wondering, with the Therigatha, to kind of come back to that, I've read the Charles Halsey version of that, the fellow who's at Harvard Divinity, and I like that version, but it also seems relatively translated. Though he's more of a scholar, and I actually went back and kind of read the one we were talking about, and I see like how like poetic it is. And being a teacher of English and poetry, like just having to go into a class in like 5 minutes, to do just a thing, like I can see like the difference. The Halsey version, I believe he includes the Pali, so you have that resource kind of on the other side. So I don't know, like critically, because I haven't been a part of that conversation at all. It like has that, and maybe this will just be a rhetorical question, but I don't know, like has that translation come up as well, kind of in the conversation, this current one going on with the new release of those poems?
I don't think that translation has, this one was so egregious that it just blew the lid off and so the conversation is starting. And while these kinds of conversations may be uncomfortable in the short run, I think they're going to be very beneficial, in the long run. We have to be able to have the difficult conversations, and we have to use our highest and best ways of determining, even for ourselves individually, what we will hold as true. And we have so many conflicting voices, but it is definitely incumbent upon the established lineages to address this issue from our own side, because there's so many teachers out here today that well, actually they don't even consider themselves Dharma teachers. They consider themselves mindfulness teachers and their root lineage is Theravada. But when someone is investigating the Dharma, they don't know what that means, and so it starts to get confused. So the long and short of it is that there are many teachers who are authorized and considered qualified to teach who don't even know what the Buddha said himself, and because their whole stream of training was not, and the depth, and they don't have the depth of training and the investigation into the suttas. And so this is the real problem, what is being propagated as teachings of the Buddha, corrupted in a certain way that people will not, be exposed to the teachings, and will not have the opportunity to come in this way. And I'm sorry for calling you out, Sister Mita, without your permission first. But I want to say that Susmita has had a very difficult time, because in investigating, the whole of the Dharma and putting things into practice and coming to some conclusions of what is true, born of direct experience, because most people haven't had those experiences, haven't followed, a self-investigative path in that way, then a lot of what she has shared has been rejected because it wasn't in their condensed version of what the Buddha says. And so there are many of us, and after a while you get tired of just repeating the same things. You can never go on, never go further, having to just keep repeating the same, rudimentary things over and over and over, because so much disinformation is being held up as true, and this is the path, and this is the way. And so people form their impressions coming in, and then that gets hard to hard to change, hard to shift. And we're coming up to this kind of a crisis in I won't say in all of Western Buddhism, because I can't speak to all of it, but certainly in America, because I'm in the throes of dialogues, with lineages around this. And that's why I think it's important for us to have these conversations, to know what it is that we hold as true and that we are pressing into the full realization of. Even though this might not sound titillating, it's not like giving me great peace. It's not, but ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance is just ignorance. Sorry, sister.
May I say something? So ignorance is not bliss. Yes, that's. I'm so completely new to this. I feel a little bit like I'm stepping into a graduate seminar somewhere on Latin translation and don't speak a word of Latin yet. So I just want to mention that, not just to call myself out as being completely uneducated, and hopefully you are understanding that I want education, but also to keep in mind that I assume that everybody here is coming at this at a different level, and we're talk about in the weeds and wonky. I'm enjoying listening, but I'm not sure I'm understanding a lot, and that's okay. Please don't stop on my account. Just wanted to put that out there.
So, go ahead.
That's me.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, so after last Thursday, I went on Sutta Central and read for quite a time about this controversy. And I was really, really impressed by how the people talk to each other. There was a kind of dialogue that I think I have not read before, and I just loved it. And I went back and back and back, like nearly every day, but probably not every day, but nearly every day. And what I found out Tuesday, I think the last posting that I read was that actually the publisher and the author of this work of poetry had agreed to reprint it with the designation that this is a work of poetry and it's not a translation. And I guess that the Library of Congress will also reclassify it. And I was so overjoyed, by that outcome, that they really managed to take it off the shelves and put it onto different shelves where it belongs more. So that was something I learned since last week. And also the same spirit comes across from the passages that we read today, the way how Bhante Sujato undoes somebody else's argumentation, I find highly skilled and impressive. I mean, I was just amazed, and I'm sure I'm going to go back and read more by him just to learn what kind of thinking or what kind of a maybe it's not even thinking, contemplation or whatever, a process somebody has who is really skilled. The other thing I feel like I could mention today is that one of my conditionings is I was raised Catholic, and I feel like that is just so far in me. I'm always surprised whenever it sort of shows its head again. And I personally, for me, and that might be conditioning too, I find Buddhism much, much more gentle to me. But the idea of rebirth really scares me. It's like you can't only go to hell once, but you might be going to hell like 3 times or 4 times. So I wasn't really sure what to make out of that idea of rebirth. And if anybody has any good insight that would help me over time to put that fear aside, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Hi, I put my hand, I think it's my turn.
Okay.
I didn't get a lot from what we just read, but as I sit here and I think about my idea of rebirth, I realize that I don't have a fixed idea of rebirth. For me, there is this sense of possibility or not possibility. And but what I realize is that I really believe in the present. And I do really believe in the 5 precepts and the Eightfold Path. And I feel like if there is rebirth or not, when I practice the precepts in the Eightfold Path, and I there is something that can bring some benefits afterward. But I rely on the day to day and time to time and everything that is happening at the moment. And that's that's what came to me right now. It resonated to me.
Sister Grace, could you drop down in the article where that is sort of the conclusion as well, or encouragement?
On the Kalama Sutta?
No, in the Suda Central discussion. And he quotes what Buddha said, like if there is no rebirth, then this is the benefit of holding this view. Fatima, you have the Buddha's mind.
So Rachel, that first email that I sent you that says not for sharing, it's probably down at the bottom of that somewhere that Panyawati is speaking of.
It's just a little bit below where you stop.
Where we left off, after the questions about the text. Let's give her some time to pull up the email and pull it up.
I didn't get it.
I apologize. I don't know it's hard to see who's there. There's no camera, so I'm not sure if we're working on it. There she is. You said below that, Venerable? Keep going down. It was on the first email, Rachel. The other email. The one that wasn't for sharing. Okay, I'll see if I can pull it up.
I'll find. You all just did. I'll find
You gonna read it, Venerable, or will?
when I find.
Okay. Well, meanwhile, while Venerable's doing that too, I just want to share that even last week, it was, I mean, this is good conversation and good dialogue to talk about these things, also about the Therigatha and this article. But the point is really not about, the question is not rebirth or not, or no rebirth, or the question about right or wrong, but I think really to turn the mirror back and to say, where is it that we're meeting the Dharma? Where are you being a lamp unto yourself, a refuge unto yourself, where you're meeting the direct experience and the understanding of all the teachings, even the Buddhist concepts and the Buddhist sharing and the teachings, to become your own? I think that's the bigger question, because we spent a lot of time going back to Sutta Cento, reading about Gil Fronsdale, Shijato, about the author and the publisher, but the practice is for us to come back and to really look at ourselves and what articles are we reading, and where are we reaching out and putting our spiritual practice, like Josh mentioned earlier, that it could be quite dangerous. You know, you just don't go sit, Panyawati shared last week, you just don't go sit in a dentist chair and be like, I need a root canal. So the question should also be for us to look back and investigate which articles have we read and we've taken to be true, or where are we at in our Dharma experience, where we're naming things and calling things because of our conditioning and deeming that to be true or certain. That's the bigger homework for us.
Sister?
Yes, I'm here.
Susmita.
Okay, Susmita, you can unmute yourself and share.
Okay.
Hi, Mita.
Hi. My dad actually, I don't know, there's a lot of echo coming. Okay. Kalama Sutta gave me really the encouragement to do the investigation, because I grew up in India where I was a lone Buddhist among Hindus, and they believe in deities and all kinds of gods and goddesses. And here I question, why I'm a Buddhist. But very early on, I had some experiences. Of course, the question of rebirth and all that, but didn't come. But there are some experiences and recollections where I knew this is not coming from this 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old body mind. Some simple examples are like, I would knew certain meaning of the word which I never heard, like the word labyrinth, like the word guardian. These are English words which I never heard, but I know exactly what they meant, what they are. And yeah, while playing, suddenly I would have this, and I would know this mind or awareness, whatever that I'm sensing is beyond this little child playing. Things like that, which then I also had my memory of the earliest, you can say my birth memory. Memories like that, yeah, that made me think like, it looks like I existed before. I don't know for sure, but I kept an open mind. I never too much worried about rebirth, because my main emphasis was how to keep the mind in wholesome state, to stay on the Eight Noble Four path. But rebirth has a lot of implications because it is connected with karma. And if we don't accept rebirth, then we don't accept karma fully, the full load of karma, and how it affects our, going forward, our future. of course, it's not the same body, mind, born, being born, but it is the tendencies that we carry. And children have tendencies even, when they're born. Every mother knows this. Different child had different tendencies, inclinations, and some of them unconscious, many of them unconscious. These are some of the things, habits, and patterns we have to work with to progress along the path. So it's very important to investigate your own experience and also to read other, there have been many research done by, I forget this professor's name in University of Virginia. He did several studies in Sri Lanka, in India, where some children, and I heard that growing up in India, about children remembering their past lives and exactly locating who they were, which village they lived, and what their parents or husbands or children were. And sometimes people go locate them actually. So there are many incidents like that where some children keep that memory for whatever reason of past lives. And then there are many hypnotic things. Sometimes people, to address their deepest fear, phobias, they go to hypnotherapist to uncover where sometimes they remember their past lives and why they carry this memory of extreme fear or phobia that cannot be located in this lifetime. So just to keep an open mind, and our mind has this very power that it can suppress something which happens in this life. If we have some terrible trauma or things, we suppress that memory. That's the way to protect it. And many people don't want to know because it is scary sometimes. And but if you have a mind that wants to know the truth, I want to know the truth. I want to know what's ultimately true. Even my head falls off. That kind of, because Dharma is truth. Because we cannot base our life on some false or incorrect view. So at least you have to give, Buddha told about this, but what is the sense of it and how he explained it? It is important to know the root texts and how he explained Dhamma, truth. Thank you.
So Venerable, if you didn't find it yet, I think we have it, or if you want to share it. Do you want us to share it? Okay, Rachel, if you can pull it up and scroll down so we could find the piece that Venerable would like us to see. And Venerable, if you want to unmute yourself, or the host can unmute you. Here's Fronsdale ends with old misunderstanding.
Okay. I looked at several different suttas that had been referenced, and I thought it was in this particular article. It may not be, but it's where the Buddha says pretty much what Fatima said, and I think it's so wonderful. He says, like, this is really real, and if you don't believe it, you will see it. Anyway, he said, but if you live as if it were real, then here and now, you will have a certain type of life. You will live you will be praised by the wise. You know, your life will go smoothly because you hold this as true. So there's still a benefit, even if there was no such thing as rebirth linkage, although there is. And so it's some kind of way of massaging the mind and cultivating a certain attitude towards things. You know, most of this is like 95% attitude. And when one holds something as if that could be true, then it encourages us to live a certain way, and then that living that certain way brings its own benefits. Is what I'm trying to say. And so when I, you know, coming from a Christian background, we're taught, you know, that you live once and then the judgment, you know, and like, geez, that's enough to scare the bejeebies out of you. You have fear. And she was saying, well, you know, I forget who it was. Maybe it was Regina who was saying, well, now hell more than one time. Well, the good news is that it's not somebody judging you and condemning you there. Here you have choice over destination by one's own thoughts and words and actions. And so I don't see myself holding rebirth in the way that I held how I live my life and a God would judge me, because he teaches dependent in origination, that I am creating the conditions in, you know, this life. Now, what I was thinking is that if there was, I think we have a misunderstanding around rebirth that's tied into a misunderstanding around karma, because if we had to, if there was a tit for tat, like you cut off my hand, in another life I'll cut off your hand. If it was something like that, how could we ever get out? There would be no escape. And so, so there has to be something else that comes into this mix that neutralizes, or it's like if you had a glass of dark chocolate, that when you pour white milk in, it lightens the dark chocolate. And if you had like 4 times as much milk as you did dark chocolate, it would be beige in color and then almost white, depending on how much you dilute it with the white milk. And I think that karma moves somewhere along that line. It's not eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And if we understood it in that way, that there are things that we do that set in motion, that neutralize, that, you know, then we wouldn't be so afraid of the concept, you know, because I know that every time I'm taking in the Dharma, every time I'm living it, I'm walking it out, even when it feels uncomfortable because it outed the ego or whatever. Every time I'm doing that, I know that I am satisfying something in the whole scheme of things, you know, by that wholesome movement, that wholesome attitude, that wholesome way of looking, that wholesome way of walking. And the joy comes in immediately, or if it was a little ego shocking, it comes in a little while as we begin to grow, as like the grace that's in us begins to expand. Then we find that it becomes, one can see and lose fear of the rebirth process, but also one does everything in mind with cooling the fires of becoming. And that's an attitudinal change. That's a you know, that's a true mental shift in thinking. It's like consciousness. And we think of consciousness as a thing, like a noun. And he's saying, no, it's a verb, or, you know, it's a process. It's something that's constantly moving and changing. And when that becomes clear to you, then one doesn't cling so much to a notion or notions of how we think or what there is, because consciousness is no longer concrete. Like, consciousness is me, but we recognize consciousness as merely a process itself. And right there is the turning point in how we approach in whole life, and how we walk through life. That right there, that consciousness is not a thing. Consciousness is not me. That consciousness is a process. And I think he may talk about that a little bit on down further in that article. If you could take it and just read it in your own time, and you can devote some attention to this. And this is, I forget what job, but said that, you know, it's like above my pay grade. Well,
Josh,
actually,
the other
it's
Josh.
not above my pay grade.
Mhm.
And the thing is that we do have the capacity to know, but sometimes our knowing has to be toggled, or and I think that's what the Buddha does a lot. He drops the seed in there, because if the right seed was dropped in there and nurtured, the dawning of understanding would come. It's not like it's not like learning in the worldly way or worldly sense of learning things. It's like realizing, and realizing is different from learning, like through tuition, somebody pouring things in from the inside. His whole direction is towards the realization and the knowing, pouring things in from the outside, but realization and knowing flowering up from the inside is, and this is an exact opposite way of learning, if you will, in the way the Buddha teaches us, as to the way we as just ordinary human beings with our ways and our ways of thought and our structures of appearances, how we view learning and understanding. And so we struggle with it because we're trying to use our old instruments to know the Dharma, but it can't be comprehended in that way. And that's what's so difficult for some of us, and why some of us have so much trouble coming to a conclusion about what is true, or opening themselves up to be able to have to directly apprehend these truths. And so I'm hoping that some of this, what seems like deep conversation, but it's not, encourages you that you can know what is true. Because if people are embracing something and saying, but I don't know if I believe this, I don't know what's true, how would I know what is true if I'm unenlightened? And that's, how can I determine, how can I, and that kind of doubt in your capacity to know what is true keeps one from advancing on the path. That's what I'm trying to say. And so my encouragement is, they have a term for it in one, maybe some therapists on the call or psychologists on the call knows, but they have a term for whatever we currently believe is true. We're always looking for confirmation of that. We're reading that into everything, because that's how we're wired, they say, that we look to confirm what we hold on to. So part of the most important aspect of our investigation, quote, into the nature of things, is to what we already think we know, or what we already accept as true, or what we already hold on to. We already have that, but he encourages us to be able to put that up against the opposite and see where we land. Can we investigate the opposite of what we believe is true? And at the end of that, where do we stand? And that's how we have shifting perceptions and shifting awarenesses and shifting understandings. I came up ultra conservative Christian dogma, and and we were told certain things about people who had certain proclivities, who particularly around and we thought everybody gay was absolutely going to hell. It's not even a question, no need to even discuss it, and that could have been right behind the one that said you're also going to go to hell if you eat on the wrong plate on a certain day, so and when we took that one as absolute, the law of God, and the one about the wrong plate is like you can take that or leave that, but I know where I am now in the breadth of my understanding, around such I won't say issues, around such natural forces and natural ways of being in the world, and it's entirely different, but it's because I didn't keep reinforcing, my view by things, looking for things that supported my view, but by being willing to go to the opposite end and ponder and listen and hold. That's how I grew, and that's how my understanding shifted. But I thought I was a very compassionate person, and I would think the only way, here's my compassion for you, you better change or you going to hell. That was it. And very sincere I was, but sincerely wrong. I no longer hold that view. Now, maybe somebody on this call does. So I'm not speaking to you. I'm only speaking of myself, that I know from direct experience, from all that's coming to me around these discussions, that I was sincerely wrong in my view. And so I could let that fall away and embrace, uh, a new view. So that's why the path is so wonderful to tread, because I do think we are intelligent beings, and we're always growing and reaching and lifting to know more, to expand more, to come to the fullness of our potential. But we can't do it without having such discussions and without doing certain investigations about what we hold to be true. I mean, like we can't be lazy about it. A lot of our ignorance just really comes from laziness. Some of our ignorance comes from not wanting to, like, have conversations where there's any conflict. Like, can't we all just get along? A lot of it comes, we have to put in the hard work, and mostly we have to be willing to suspend our views to investigate something else.
Thank you, Venerable. We did find the text, so we'll close with that too. Just the one thing about doubt and skepticism, and also fear. It's always good to turn that mirror around, because when there's faith, virya, when there's actual faith in the realizations and the understanding of your experience of the Dhamma, that's different than the conceptual knowledge, the reading, the reciting, the learning. But when there's that touching of it, that's where the faith will come. That's where the energy will come to continue to be a seeker of the truth, to want to let those things fall away that you don't know to be certain, but still with an openness and a vastness that also may be true. But this is what's here in direct experience for me. So a good keynote to turn into is that faith. If there is faith there, if there is virya there, if you've experienced the Dhamma to bring you where you are on this path, and you know that you're becoming this individual that we take on the path to want to be a better person, then that's where you can put your faith in, and not so much in the skepticism and the doubt, but just to always ask yourselves, is this true? Is this realized? Do I know this to be true? Do I know this to be certain? And when you don't take up the opposition that it may not be. Just leave that open, that this can also be true. So here in the last piece of the Kalama Sutta, which is also called the Four Assurances or the Four Comforts, the Kalamas, after hearing the teaching of the Blessed One, so it is, Blessed One, so it is, O well-gone one, one who is the disciple of the Noble One, his mind thus free from hostility, free from ill will, undefiled and pure, acquires four assurances in the here and now. If there is a world after death, if there is fruit of actions rightly and wrongly done, then this is the basis by which the breakup of the body after death, I will reappear in a good destination, the heavenly world. This is the first assurance. But if there is no world after death, if there is no fruit of actions rightly and wrongly done, then here in the present life I looked after myself with ease, free from hostility, free from ill will, free from trouble. This is the second assurance he acquires. If evil is done through acting, still I have willed no evil for anyone, having done no evil action, from where will suffering touch me? This is the third assurance he acquires. But if no evil is done through acting, then I can assume myself pure in both ways. This is the fourth assurance he acquires. One who is a disciple of the noble ones, his mind thus free from hostility, free from ill will, undefiled and pure, acquires these four assurances in the here and the now. Magnificent, Lord, magnificent. What that feels like, and investigate, do your own investigation. See you next Tuesday, or see you Sunday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good to see everybody.
Good to see everybody.